It's great to be here this morning with Scotland's Braveheart, Colin Hendry. Hi, Colin.
Morning, Donny. How are you?
Very well, very well. How's Keith?
Keith, well, we've had quite a bit of snow, but it's a bit fresher today. So once I've finished with yourself about that bike up the Ballach for a run around for an hour or so, getting wet and cold.
Oh, that's great. Do you put many miles on in the bike, Colin?
I do. It's mountain biking, it's off-road, which I prefer that because I know that I'm never going to meet any traffic. That's the beauty of it, and it's a bit rough. It's a bit of a rough terrain, and I do about maybe 8 to 10 miles a session, about an hour and 10 minutes. So, and if I do that three, four times a week, sometimes I do a bit further. I've gone down to the coast to Cullen a few times, which is like a 23 mile round trip. But again, you see, you're on the main road, Donny, and I just feel that I prefer the off-road stuff. So you've got a real incline at one point, and then you're doing the hill at the next. You don't get that in the main roads, but it keeps you fit and it gets you in the fresh air. It's great at the minute.
That's true. That's true. So tell us a little bit about who was your influences when you were growing up, Colin, over in Keith.
Well, not very often do I get asked that question, but it's got to lie safely with my father.
Yeah.
My dad, it's a hell of a story, really. I mean, my dad was not sport-minded. He wasn't a footballer. He wasn't into the active side of it. But he when he can, or when he could, he'd go and watch Aberdeen. It wasn't very often, very seldom. And of course, Scotland. As a 16-year-old kid, we ended up as a family. We went to the World Cup in 1982. So there was a World Cup club in Keith, and we ended up doing in Fuengirola. We stayed in a hotel, and we seen the 3 games. And I ended up travelling. When I travelled to the Brazil game in Seville, I remember the hotel. The hotel provided us a packed lunch. Brilliant. And of course, there's no aircon in the buses, in the coaches, and of course, by the time we got to Seville, the sandwiches are all soaking wet because the butter is all melted. But that was one of the things that I remember. Of course, the game was a great game, but no, my father, he loved the game. He loved the game of football. But when I talk about an influence, my dad had about 4 or 5 different jobs. Donny, he was the hardest working man I ever knew. So he'd be up at 5 a.m. and start his work at 6 as a postman. And then come lunchtime, he'd finish. So that's his working day, but he did that every day for 6 days. In the summer he's at driving school, so he's a driving instructor. So he'd learn people to drive from 1-2 o'clock until, in the summer, 8-9 o'clock daylight. In the winter, it would be to 5 o'clock. And then he had the sweetie shop. So he had the sweetie shop and the fruiterers. So he'd go down there, do the till, stock the fruit up, stock the sweeties up, do all that at night. And then he was a community councillor. So he'd do a bit for the council. And so he'd get up at 5 a.m. And in them days, pubs closed they closed at 10, but he'd be in for the last half hour, 2 whiskey chasers, home, bed, back up at 5 o'clock the day after. He did it 6 days a week. And then on a Sunday, you never seen him till lunchtime because he'd catch up in all his hours and have a lie in. But as hard work goes, it was in your face, Donny, and you do as I do because it was great to have been that sort of have that sort of figure to lead you into your life,
because as you said there, Paul, it's just you just get on with it, work really hard, and if you're in that environment, that's what you pick up, isn't it?
No hiding places, Donny. You could, my then chores were when I go back from school at 4 o'clock would be to set the fire, or clean the ashes out for the night before, set the fire. Then my mum would come back to the sweetie shop, the fruiterers. She would then light the fire. And I would then with a trailer, because we lived in top of the post office in Keith, and the sweetie shop was like 2 lanes down. So I would fill the trailer with everything that had to go for the sheds at the back of the post office down to the sweetie shop at whatever time Dad went down, opened up the shop, and then I brought everything in, and then he did the stocking and the till and everything. So there was a routine. There was a routine sort of thing as I, 9, 10, 11, 12 years of age sort of thing.
God. I remember you telling me when you were living above the post office about kicking the ball. Was it a kicking the ball against the thing and you went back? What was it? The sign? Yeah.
At the back of the post office was where the vans were kept, and there was 2 areas. There was a building in between. There's 2 areas. So the vans, and still to this day, the vans are kept in these 2 areas. But there's a couple of windows. We had one shed, and the other sheds belonged to the post office. But they had windows in the shed. So when you're playing the footy, my aim at that time was probably as bad as it is now, to be fair. So the windows got broke a few times, Donny. Yeah. So Mum and Dad wasn't happy with that because they had to pay to get them replaced. And then eventually we did have the signs, no football allowed. They went up. And listen, I could go down that lane now, 2021, and these signs are still up. No game, no football allowed, and they're still there.
It's incredible when you look back, isn't it? Because there's all these kind of mementos or artifacts or whatever you want to call them of your journey, the sign, or you could have, I'm sure you imagine you battering the ball against the sign almost.
Yeah, we did that a few times because we'd taken it out on the sign sort of thing. Aim for the sign. When the vans weren't there, but they always came back at lunchtime. So on a Saturday morning, for example, was the prime time to get a game of footy in the yard at the back because the vans were out, we were off school. Sort of thing.
And how did was football, the main sport in Keith? Like when I grew up in Pro, that's all anyone did. There wasn't any other sport apart from football. Yeah. It would have been the same in Keith, was it? Just football?
Exactly, same, nothing else. Donny, nothing else. If you're lucky enough to have a ball and you bust the ball, then what you'd end up doing is it'd be a can of Coke or an empty Coke can until that became decimated, and then you get another Coke can until that became decimated. You just, honestly, you really just kick stones,
Yeah.
You'd kick a stone to have a game of footy. It's mad. It's when you think back as to what you went through just to have a game. Just to get a game.
I can imagine that, Colin, isn't it? Because then certainly my mum used to get on to me about the leather in the front of my shoes going from kicking the stones.
Christ, I think 3 times a term, 3 times a year you get new school shoes, and every time you got the message, did I come back with them kicked out within a week or 10 days? It's very difficult not to do that in them days, especially when you're playing footy on concrete.
And what was your route into the professional game from Keith then, Colin?
Well, I was with Isle of Ale as a 15, 16-year-old, and there was about 4 or 5 of us. And because I was tall, I got away with it a bit, Donny, to play in a man's game at that age. But I was training with Keith from the age of 13, 14, and Bobby Wilson was manager. Yeah. So the junior side was the automatic from school football to go into, but then Keith had the youth team on a Sunday. So my weekend of football would be on a Saturday morning was a school team, Keith school team. Saturday afternoon would be Isle of Ale, and then on a Sunday afternoon would be the Keith youth team. So 3 games in 2 days. 3 games in 2 days. So you can imagine how I felt Sunday tea time. But it built you up. Yeah. It built you, it made you, it gave you, these days, people would say, well, that's not, you'd never be able to benefit from that these days. But I definitely benefited in them days because it made a man of you.
Yeah. And you would have loved it. You would have loved it.
Every minute of it. Every minute of it. We were lucky to have had the organisations that could have these in place in this area because, look at some of the kids these days. They don't have the facility, even in 2021. Whereas in them days, and of course they'd say you'd never get away with that now. Well, you wouldn't get away with that now because their output, the physical output for a kid to play 3 games in a weekend is ridiculous. Yeah. But hey, we loved it. It was great.
And you weren't a centre half at this point, or were you playing centre half in the school?
As a kid, centre half, centre forward.
Centre forward.
Breingen, the big Breingen centre half of the back to go up front to score the goal. Yeah, I had an eye for goal as a kid.
Yeah.
And even when I was with Bobby Wilson, I was coached as a striker. And it wasn't until I got the chance to go professional that I went as a striker, went to Dundee as a striker. And then Don Mackay, he left Dundee. Archie Knox took over. Archie wasn't convinced. So he converted me a bit to centre half. And then I got the taste of that, and that's how it really came around. Between leaving Dundee and signing for Blackburn Rovers, I was more or less committed as being a centre-back.
And because Sir Alex had a look at you as a centre forward, didn't he? And
He did, yeah. He had serious injuries up front, and I was playing for the Junior Scotland, North of Scotland, against the National Junior Scotland as a warm-up game for them, through in Heatheryfold in Aberdeen. And I was only 16. And we got beat 1-0 by the national side. And he said, I've been looking at you, and I'll keep your dad's number and everything. He said, you're just short of what I need at the minute. John Hewitt was out injured, and can't remember who else. It might have been Eric Black. Blackie might have been Eric at the time as well. So he did say, yeah. And many years after I'd meet Sir Alex, and he said, from that day to this, I would never have known that you would have went on and been their biggest threat to winning the Premiership with Blackburn and captain in Scotland. He said, I would never have known that from being the kid of 15, 16 in Keith, which I nearly signed.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, well, you're lost, Alex.
And I think that's what people forget as well. These are, you're mentioning, Bobby's team at Keith. That was good sides then in that Highland League, wasn't it?
Oh, that was a top team of footballers, Donny. I'm lucky that I'm connected on Facebook to the Highland League Facebook page, and they're going through the names and the players, and that was great. I mean, I remember Keith playing in the Scottish Cup. I think it was Berwick away, and they came back. We got beat. I think we got beat at home by Berwick. I think it was 1980, 79, 1980, something like just before. Well, I wouldn't have been involved, but I was a great fan, obviously. But I was training with the team. And that was a hell of a team that Bobby assembled. What a track record he had.
Yeah, brilliant.
And a lovely man, lovely man.
Great guy. And when you moved from Dundee down to England, was it a big difference going to England to playing in Dundee?
Well, what happened was at Dundee was I was a squad player more or less. When you went, I lived in the Hilltown in Dundee and my digs. So if I'd go down the Hilltown into the Keeler Centre or the Wellgate Centre, just to pass the time with my digs mate, Rab Shannon, who was firmly in the first team at Dundee at the time, nobody would know me. Yeah. Nobody would know me if I had him, who I was and what I did. And then in '87, in the March, I think it was in '87, I signed for Blackburn. And within 3 weeks, I was at Wembley playing in the Full Members Cup final as a striker, scoring the goal 3 minutes before the end, the half volley for just inside the box, in front of 40,000 people, 30,000 from Blackburn. And you go back to Blackburn and it's absolute hero worship. So you go from zero to hero in days. It just was someone else. And even in them days, obviously there's no social media in them days, but anywhere you walked, anywhere you did, everything, just people wanted a piece of you. It was mad. So you'd walk through the streets of Blackburn, not very often, but when you did it, you were just mobbed in relation to walking through the street in Dundee 3 weeks earlier and nobody having a clue who you were.
What was it like, Colin, then because that's an amazing story, to walk out of that iconic stadium in Wembley with 30, 40,000 people there 3 weeks earlier. You wouldn't have been playing to many people. What did that feel like to walk out at Wembley?
Well, it was a new experience, obviously, for me. And when you think back and you look back now and I do stuff like this, Donny interviews and, whatever, you try and explain that. I mean, I've said, listen, there's not a lot of Scotsmen have scored a winning goal in the cup final at Wembley. And then they go, Kenny Dalglish, yes, right. And there's not a lot.
No.
I think maybe, I think Paul Dickoff scored the equaliser for Man City in the playoff final, but that was an equaliser, but he scored. Big Duncan Ferguson, I think Big Dunk might have scored, but there's very few Scotsmen scored a winning goal in the cup final at Wembley. Obviously, Kenny did in the European Cup, but so I take great pride in that, and it's a bit of a joke to a degree because there was only 40,000 on a 100,000 capacity stadium, but 30,000 was from Blackburn.
Yeah.
So for a population of 120,000, 150,000 of Blackburn at the time, you're looking at 25% of the population of Blackburn being at Wembley on that day. So hell of a feat for them.
What do you think, Colin, it is about towns or cities like Blackburn, around, that whole Lancashire, Yorkshire area, which industrial, that football is a huge meaning to people around there, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you look at Blackburn, Bury, Burnley, I think they found their members of the Football League back in the 1800s. They were the first teams. Bury, unfortunately, God rest them. I mean, sad story that. But so that was where, in that area, was most of the teams that came from when there was the initial beginning of the Football League.
See, I didn't know that. Oh, yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm not going to get corrected here. There is Huddersfield Town, I think, might be in there. There's a few clubs that were the founder members of the Football League, and them were the teams that I mentioned, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's incredible. So that, when you were there, you went from, you said going down to the Keeler Centre to be able, everyone knowing you in Blackburn. It seemed as if Blackburn was just the right place for you in a lot of different ways, was it?
It's a great, how many Scotsmen go to England down the leagues and they just get forgotten about and they come back to Scotland? And that's what I can remember people saying to my late wife Denise's parents, my in-laws, Davy and Kath Duff, and Davy go to the clubby at the weekend where it was a working men's club, a game of snooker or something. And he said, "Oh, see, Colin's gone down to England." He said, he's got a bit of a chance. He said, "Oh, he'll be back up here soon. He'll be playing for East Fife or Stenhousemuir or someone." And it was just like written off. You're like written off right away because you didn't make the mark at Dundee. And people gauge it by that, and they go, "Yeah, well, he's not all that anyway, so he'll be back up here soon." So, although I don't know them, and then in an alternative way, I've proved people wrong. I didn't have to prove anything wrong. I just had to prove to myself my capabilities and what level I was going to get to. And the thing is, Donnie, is that when you go up the levels, you strive to get to the next level. And the funny thing, the other thing is that the higher you get, the more professional you get. That's how I found. Because when I was at the peak, when I was at the top, with, the Hendry household, with Denise and 4 kids and 2 dogs, everything went as I said it. And I was becoming more like that because I was striving to get better and better. And so it wasn't always a nice place to be.
It's that edge of competitiveness,
That's right. And the professionalism side of it was very, very important to me because that's what got me there in the first place. But the more you get, the more you want to get better at.
Do you think, I know you probably never noticed at the time, but when you reflect back, do you think that, your family and your dad's hard work and, that roots of just working hard to be the best you can be and provide and everything, do you think that kind of kept you going and pushed you to be the best?
The sacrifices that everybody made was enormous, really. For an example, on a Friday afternoon, I'd go to bed and then Denise would have to attend to the kids coming back from school. Kids had to come back from school at 4 o'clock. Don't make a noise. Dad's sleeping. I mean, don't get me wrong, Donnie, with a big house, so it wasn't as if, we were in a 2 up, 2 down, but we're in a nice big house but still keep 2 what's the practices that we've installed in order for Dad to make sure he has a good performance tomorrow for whoever he's playing for, with Blackburn, Rangers, Man City, whatever, Bolton. That's where and they were great at that. You know, the sacrifices people made in order for me as a person to achieve what I've achieved, they've got to be thanked. They've got to be recognised.
I think that's a brilliant point, Colin, that not a lot of people talk about, or, you know, they'll see it just at a surface level is the sacrifices and the understanding of, as you said, Denise and the kids, to knowing what to do to help you be the best you can be. And you all move forward, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we all reap the benefits because we lived in a nice home and we had nice holidays and we had a nice life and we've had a good life. And, you know, that's part of it. That's the rewards that you get, and everybody benefits, sort of thing. Donnie, listen, it's more or less the breadwinner. So in olden days, if the man of the house is the one that goes out and works and brings in the money, and the harder he works, the better he gets, the better life is for everyone. And it's just the same. It was just the same.
I never ever get the sense from you, Colin, when you were playing, you ever had that sense of, right, I've done enough. You know, that you were always thinking, how can I get the best out of myself?
Yeah, I mean, when I squeezed myself right to the end, if I'm being honest. I mean, the body, I mean, I can't recall the amount of times I went under the knife. It was on average once a close season. And I played 19 years, I think I played professionally. So in that period, 17 to 36, I think it was 35, 36. So in that period, I averaged out because some seasons I had maybe 2 operations or 3 operations. And then a couple of seasons, I did a couple of seasons without not having an operation at all. And it was a lot of times it was tidy up operations, nothing more than that. But I squeezed myself right to the limit. I took myself right to the very, very limits, and it had to take a manager to tell me that, listen, you're finished. You're finished. You won't play at this level anymore because your body can't take it. And psychologically, mentally, I was in the zone. Donnie, I was there, but when your muscles start ripping in front of your very eyes, my calves, both my calves, I've got massive calves. But between my muscle calf and my Achilles, you've a tissue called the soleus muscle. And both soleuses and both legs went when I was at Bolton. And Sam Allardyce, he brought me in one day and I'd come back from the injury, and he said, "You're looking good in training. You feeling fit?" I said, "Yeah, I feel great. I'm up for a game Saturday if I'm selected. I'm back in the squad," sort of thing. And he said, "Listen, Colin, you're finished." As brutal as that, he says, "You're finished. You're finished at this level, son." And I wouldn't, obviously, the first thing you do is react to that. Nope, don't agree with that. But he was right. He was right. I just wasn't accepting it. You know, mentally, I was just not accepting it. But he was right, because the body was now telling me that it couldn't go on any longer to providing the physical output at that level. So I went on loan to Preston and played a couple of games, and then I tore my calf again, and then I ended up getting freed. Well, I see my contract out, went to Blackpool for 6 months, and that was a lot easier to play in that period. But hey, it happens to everyone. Comes to an end. I just wouldn't recognise it, Tony. Whether it was the Keith, the northeast of Scotland, and me saying, I will not give up. I am not backing in.
It's hard, as you said there, though, hard to hear, Colin, isn't it? Hard to hear.
Yeah, when I look back on that now, that meeting with Sam, is brutal. That's the only word I could describe it. Brutal. He was right. He was right. And although I disagreed with him at the time and didn't accept it, and I wasn't going to accept it, he was right. And, he's been proven right in that respect as well as.
If we go back a little bit, Colin, what was it like to be part of that famous Blackburn team then? That won the league.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really. I mean, we qualified for the first year of the Premiership through the playoffs against Leicester at Wembley. Another victory at Wembley for me, and within 3 years we'd won the league in '95. And what we were trying to create at the time, I don't think, but that was never mentioned or spoken about or planned for.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, don't get me wrong, we were looking to be successful and to improve every year and get better. But to win the league within 3 years was never in the equation. I think what Jack and Kenny had spoken about, as I understand it, the story was that within 5 years that Blackburn get into Europe after qualifying for the Premiership, and would win the league after 3 years. So, and would progress sixth place, second place, and first. We won in the 95. And although we didn't speak about it, you could see it going that way. You could see that after the first season being sixth, you thought, we'll easily improve on that the following season, which we did, second. And then of course, what's better than being second is actually winning it, which you would never spoke about, but we always felt we had a chance.
Yeah. And did you feel it, as well as, you know, the results coming and the success coming, did you feel yourself and getting better as a team the whole time? Did you notice that?
Yeah, because the way we played and how we played, you know, we played a 4-4-2, and in that system, really, there's no hiding place for any of that 11 players that play. The shift and the output from the wide areas, the fullbacks and the wingers. So our fullbacks, Henningberg, Graham Lasso, and then our wingers, Stuart Ripley and Jason Wilcox, who supplied Shearer and Sutton and Mickey Newell. You know, that's a team. Yeah. That's exactly a team, Donny. You know when they talk about teams and okay, I was at centre back, whoever I was with, Ian Pearce or Tony Gale, and then Tim Sherwood in the middle with Mark Atkins, who a lot of people thought it was David Batty when he only played three games, I think, that season. So it was a team, and as a team outfit, in order to go and win something, that's your players there, and there's no hiding place.
Yeah. And what was it like? What was it Sir Kenny Dalglish now? What was it like having, you know, Kenny Dalglish, who I imagine from you would have looked up to growing up in Keith? What was that like? Yeah,
Kenny was my idol, and you know, when he went to Blackburn, when I was at Man City, I thought, that's a stamp, that's a real mark of intention from Jack Walker, who took over the football club. And I mean, Donny, that's the other thing, accused of buying the league first. Well, no, they didn't buy the league, because Jack, in his infinite wisdom, invested millions in players.
Yeah.
But then sold them for millions more.
Yeah.
And now, listen, in the present day, that doesn't happen. Even after us, Man United were buying the Rooneys and Ferdinands of the world for 20, 30 million pounds, and they walk free. I mean, Shearer came for 3.3, he goes for 15. Sutton comes for 5, he goes for 10. I cost 25 grand in 87. I left there in 98 for 3.3 million pounds. So Jack was no mug. He wasn't throwing the cash to win and just wipe it under the slate, as if, because on top of that, he built the stadium.
Yeah.
He built the stadium and gave the stadium back to the town of Blackburn. And, you know, it's great to be part of that and everything, where it's a town club, as you mentioned, it's a town, but haven't had that success.
Yeah, and, you know, I remember you speaking before about, you know, the vision the club had and Kenny had in terms of building the team, because it wasn't always obvious to people outside or sometimes even inside on who they were taking in and who they were letting go of.
No, I mean, the first season in the Prem, or even the season that before we got promoted, Kenny was signing a player each week, and they weren't. You're not talking like at the time the most expensive player in England, 3.3 million, Alan Shearer, when we just got promoted. You know, there's a couple of $100,000 there, or 500 grand here, or whatever. So, but he was doing it on a weekly basis to create the squad, and not all the players that he did sign played right away. I mean, Tim Sherwood had a terrible start to his career, the captain. He signed him for £500,000 from Norwich. Couldn't get a game in the team. People were like questioning the quality of the player and what his attributes were and what he was bringing to the team. And then eventually he gets a start, he gets a run of games, and all of a sudden you've got a player in your hands. You've got what Kenny knew right all along. but we didn't. We didn't know all along, because you can only gauge with what you're playing with and what you're looking at, sort of thing. But they seen it's like Alan Shearer. I mean, that was an incredible bit of business. But 3.3 million and the record, and you're thinking, and David Speedy, the catalyst for Blackburn for being so successful throughout the playoff final at Leicester that season, going the other way, not even getting a chance to kick a ball in the Premiership for Blackburn. The public of Blackburn are going, whoa, what's going on here? What is happening? You know, our idol, the one guy we're looking up to, you're letting him go. Crazy business. But as he's proven so many times, Kenny, you know, he proved everybody wrong and him right. Incredible
that kind of vision to bring the team around. And I loved what you said about as well, not just because you can't just buy a team as well, and because other people have tried it and it doesn't work as well. But then
that season, Donny, with Wolves and Derby County spend more money. And one of them, I think, couldn't even get out of the division. They couldn't even get out of the old championship, like the second division, is it? Well, the championship now, the Division 2 sort of thing. They couldn't even get promoted, but they'd spent, and they were wealthy, just as wealthy, I think, at the point at that time as Jack Walker.
What is your fondest memories of that time, Colin, at Blackburn? Then I imagine you have many.
Yeah, I mean, I think just coming from what it was when I got there in '87, I played in front of, well, the first game I played was the semi-final in the Full Members' Cup. On the Monday night, I was playing against Rangers reserves at Dens Park for Dundee. Then I got taken off just after half-time to be told that Blackburn had made an offer. You don't have to go if you don't want it. So I decided on that pretty sharply. And then on the Wednesday night, I played 90 minutes against Ipswich, which they beat them 2-0 to make the Full Members' Cup. And there was only 3 sides of the ground, but there's still 17,000 in because it was a semi-final of a cup, obviously, that night. Then on the Saturday, your average, we go back to 4,500, 5,000 average gate. So coming from that to having a stadium in the Premiership and selling out, beating Man United at home, beating Liverpool at home, beating Arsenal, beating all the top teams at home is a hell of a journey when you think about it. And I'm lucky because there wasn't very few of us. There was a couple of kids, 2 or 3 kids that were kids at the time, Jason Wilcox, David May, but they were only kids in 1987, 1988, 89. So they were coming through the youths. And by the time I'd come back in 91, they were like in the team, but verging and breaking into the team sort of thing. So I was on my own as far as experiencing the whole rise from being an average or nearly a Division 3 club, from an average, less than average Division 2 club to the Premiership champions.
Yeah, incredible journey. And I remember you saying can't remember what year it was, you said that you would be just training the equivalent of Drowning the Park, and isn't it? There was no fancy training facilities.
Oh no, we trained doing it the crematorium in Blackburn, and the pitches were lined up on the road up to the crematorium in Blackburn, and very often there'd be a funeral procession going past and would stop and stand still in recognition to the passing of whoever it was going up to the crematorium or the funeral area. And even when we got there in the morning, sometimes we had to pick up the dog business and everything else and put up the goals, and that's what it was. That's what it was, and that was just part and parcel of even professional football. We'd still had to do that.
Yeah, I think again that's a great point, Colin, because so often, especially nowadays, people sometimes will tend to think of professionalism or giving your all as having all the fanciest gear. Once I get that, then I'll work harder. And everyone around there just did what they had to do, whatever the circumstances there.
Yeah, everybody mucked in. There wasn't anybody that wouldn't get their hands dirty, Donny, in relation to out with the footballing side of working hard and training hard and and run until you drop, and that side of the game. It was also the other side of the game of little things like picking up your training gear and putting it in the right baskets, for example. As stupid as it is, you do 3 baskets. A basket for socks, a basket for slips and shorts, and a basket for the tops. And just little things like making sure that they go in the right baskets. These baskets had to be taken by the apprentices through to the washroom to be washed by them in them days. There was no washerwoman or laundry ladies or anything like that. It was because I did that at Dundee. I did all that at Dundee. So there was no such thing as a. What there was you had your kit man between the kit man and the kids to organise the drying of the gear, and then the kit's being put away for the next training session or the next game. So no, it wasn't just about working hard in the game or the actual profession. Loads of different outside, loads of different little bitties in the outside.
And what was Kenny like as a manager then?
Kenny was man of few words, as he often does look like, publicly. But loved a laugh, the banter, very dry sense of humour. He didn't say a lot. He took the team meeting on his own virtually. Ray Harford didn't really know the team that he'd select. He wouldn't tell anybody. He just kept it to himself. And then on delivery of the team and the tactics and everything, it wasn't a rant and a rave. It wasn't going on for 10 minutes. It was a good 3 or 4 minutes, and that was it. Then Ray Harford would pick up on the tactical side and the different areas, the defensively, midfield, and the attacking areas, and and different. I mean, it's sort of different these days. They're talking about between the lines and all these different stereotypical ways of saying things. It's a bit different from our days, but it's more or less the same, Donny. But Kenny, the one thing about Kenny was that when he spoke or said anything, everybody listened. He's one of these characters that, and there ain't a lot, but he's one of these characters. When he walked into a room, the presence was incredible. Just the presence of somebody like that. For me, that was my but no, he was very good at what he did and great success at it.
Brilliant. And when you think of as well, Colin, at the beginning of the programme, I was mentioning Braveheart, and we'll go on to your Scotland. What was the highlights of your Scotland career?
Oh, well, to play in the World Cup and the Euros, God, the amount of stories I've got about the both is, it could be here for days, but just to have been part of it. Captain in Scotland in the World Cup was a great honour for me. Unlucky for Gary McAllister, who was probably the best player I played with as well as, but all round, I should say. Fortunate for me because of that. So it was something that, as a kid growing up, Christ, Donny, it's light years away, millions of light years away, as to something you dream about to something actually happening. Ridiculous. And Keith, I've been ridiculous.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Never going to happen. Never ever going to happen.
Yeah. Because I imagine I was trying to think when we were talking about Braveheart, because I'm sure the Daily Record or something, or the Sun, didn't they? You were on the front page of the Sun, was it? Yeah.
The Sun did the double spread where they'd taken all the characters as a still from the movie and then re-implanted the face of all the squad for I think it was Euro 96. And I was there like Mel Gibson. Well, it's Mel Gibson on me, so I was always going to win the good-looking race, Donny, from hands down, wasn't it? Near Mel Gibson. But, and it was the long hair and everything else. And Braveheart came out, the movie, I think about a year before, 18 months before, and somebody put it in, and it just stuck, and it's stuck since. So you play up to it a wee bit, but it's not big deals. But the Braveheart, but no, playing in the Euros '96. Especially because it was in these soil, it was in England. And the World Cup in France, the opening game, in front of so many million people that watching it was just an incredible feeling.
And what was it like to say for that game against Brazil? What was it like to lead your country out in that moment? Well,
it's the proudest moment I could ever have I mean, I tell you what, there's a lot better people, and a lot of people that have won a lot more than me would have loved to have been in my position on that day. That's the way I look at it. I was very, very lucky, very, very fortunate, but very, very proud. And my father, he passed away 13 years ago now, but he seen it. He was there, and that's one of the greatest things that him and my late wife Denise, for the two of them to have witnessed it and seen it and been there, gives me great pride to think that they witnessed it.
Yeah, because it's almost the circle from you going with the family to the World Cup in '82, isn't it? Oh.
I mean, I think they tried to do stories at the time, the media, about us going in '82 to then 16 years later. It's mad walking out, and because that was in Spain in '82 and it was only in France in '98, sort of thing. So crazy how it evolves and not evolves, but it comes round to being from a supporter in the stand at Seville, Brazil beating Scotland 2-0, to being on the pitch in Paris and Scotland getting beat 2-1 unluckily as well.
Just incredible. So everyone remembers that game. I think I work with people all over, not just Scottish people, and everyone. I'm surprised how many people remember that game, because it was the opening game, wasn't it?
With what we've gone through nationally, or the world, I should say, COVID at the minute. The summer just gone, there was because of the lockdowns and everything, there's quite a lot of TV where they were replaying the famous games, and Blackburn winning the championship in '95. They went through everything on TV because there's no football played either, or no sport even. So they were trying to keep the public at large interested and reminding them. It was reruns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was something that till my dying day. Yeah. It goes with me, Donny, and the good thing is as well is that we've now qualified for the Euros in the summer. We've got 2 games at Hampden, we've a game at Wembley. So, with a bit of luck, with the grace of God, the fans will be able to see it and get in to watch it.
And that team you were a part of there, that I suppose that was, when we look back now, you're not aware at the time, that was kind of, I suppose, the end of a golden age at that point for Scottish football, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the man responsible for that was Craig Brown, for the period that he was in charge. And you get criticism, doesn't matter how good you are, Donny. I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson gets criticised, Kenneth Dalglish gets criticised, and if they're getting criticised, then we're all going to get criticised, aren't we? We're not going to escape. But, when you look back at the feat that Craig had managed to achieve in the 2 qualifications, it's incredible, really. And down to him, really, really, really down to him. You've still got a body of players to manage and look after. And an international manager doesn't have the same inroads to a player psychologically or anything like that, because you're only dealing with them maybe a week of 4 weeks in a month over the course of a season, or a year, when you're trying to win qualification games to qualify for the Euros or World Cup or whatever. You've not got a lot of time with these players, so you can't really get into their heads. Yeah. But you can. You've got to be able to manage them, as well as being a coach. You need to manage them, and that's what Craig did really, really well.
Yeah, he must have had a right clear idea of how he wanted you to play and everyone's strengths.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't change the way we played. Yeah. We played to our strengths. Difficult to beat. It can nick a goal here and there. Sometimes against the lower teams or the weaker teams, your Lithuanias or your San Marinos or Estonias or whatever. We wouldn't really change a lot tactically from the setup, the way we'd go out and play. But would be more attack minded, because you'd think, well, hold on a minute, we should really be beating these, and we would beat teams quite convincingly, albeit 1-0 or 2-0. But when you looked at the game, it was quite convincing,
And just as we kind of wrap up just now, Colin, if you came from, as you said there, a small village, Keith in the north of Scotland, going to Spain with your family at the World Cup, to leading Scotland out against Brazil in the World Cup. You know, if you had any advice to any young players, wherever they are, to go and make the best out of their talent, what would your advice be?
Well, they could look at what's happened to me. You know, their parents would tell them, you know, some of the parents might still be young enough, might not even remember me right enough, and chase the dream. If they really love the game that much, and it doesn't have to be football, it can be any sport, it can be any walk of life, really, Donny. There's going to be examples of people being successful and reaping the benefits of the hard work. And it goes back to my dad, where my dad worked so hard, and I thought, you know what, if I work as hard as him, I might achieve something in my life. And I did. And listen, I wasn't the best. Donny, I was never the greatest footballer. You know, when I managed in the period that I was at Blackburn and we won the league, I managed to be in the Premiership Team of the Year twice, which then my peers, they're selecting me, they're picking me, which recognition to me is that I must have been half decent. But I wasn't the greatest. And the harder you work at trying, you can never work too hard. But you've got to enjoy yourself as well. So for anybody that's listening, you're not just in football. If you work hard enough, you enjoy it. The harder you work, you might get something that you're not expecting. You might just get lucky, and hey, it's a great life. It's been a great life.
That's a brilliant message. And I loved what you said there, Colin. Is you can never work too hard. You know, that is just such a message. You can never work too hard, and it's not just I'm just talking about all different walks of life, really. You know, never accept as something being the best you can do, because the day after you can do better again. Believe me. So thanks very much for taking the time out of your day, Colin. It's been brilliant. Great to talk to you again, Donny. Thank you. I'll catch you soon. Thank you. Cheers.